All right, well, it looks like it is just about 9 o'clock Mountain Time. So let's get started. Welcome. Oh, there I am. Welcome, everyone. This is DES 314 Advanced Color Theory, and we are in our third session of our third week. And as we said in previous sessions, kind of the goal of this is not to have a formal, long 2-hour lecture, but to instead kind of do tips, tricks, things to consider, things to possibly implement, different ways to use the software, etc., as you go about your assignment 3. So we're going to be opening up Illustrator. We're going to be opening up Photoshop. We're going to be opening up Acrobat, which I guess we already have opened up, to just look at some different examples of abstract posters, things that you can do to further abstract your work. And hopefully you guys will learn some interesting, cool stuff that you may or may not, implement into your final project for the week. So we should be about 40-ish minutes, 45 minutes maybe. And yeah, we should have a lot of fun, hopefully. Perhaps we'll see things that you have not realized were possible in the software. I know whenever I do stuff like this, I'm always like, oh yeah, that's right, you can actually do this. And still kind of wondering at what point I would use it for a client project, but it's fun to at least know the capability and kind of have that to just be part of your overall creative tool belt that you can pull from as you're working. All right, so we will jump right in, and I will turn this off and switch us over. Actually, let's switch over first into our classroom and then jump into the additional slides. All right, so assignments 3 for this week. We've kind of gone over this in each class session, but always good to have a refresher, is the creation of an abstract art poster inspired by a song. So you're going to use kind of the ideas of synesthesia, which we spoke about a little bit over the past couple sessions, and really be inspired kind of with colors, with imagery, with overall arrangement of elements and such by a piece of music. So you can see here we're going to use the ideas in synesthesia to set our color palettes, to guide us in shapes, colors, overall composition. So first thing you're going to do, find a piece of music that you have a strong emotional connection to. And next, listen to it several times, writing down any kind of colors, shapes, feelings, etc. that you think of as you listen to the song. And again, just like with the cards, the idea here is not to be very literal. It is kind of more abstract. So put on your abstract artist hat as you're creating this. Try to push yourself beyond, if it talks about love, think of a heart. What's kind of the next step of abstraction that you could bring together into it. Then begin sketching concepts, ideas for your poster. Perhaps go on to a place like Pinterest or do another sort of image search so that you can just kind of see what people are doing, see how people are combining kind of fields of color and floods of paint and just working with those abstracted elements. And then finally create your poster in either Illustrator or Photoshop using no photographs, only abstracted shapes, colors, lines, etc. It says here, create your poster in either Illustrator or Photoshop, most likely, and what I will be showing you in this session is kind of both Illustrator and Photoshop, mostly because both pieces of software have some interesting and unique capabilities that if you are able to blend them together, you get a lot of cool stuff that can happen. So I would definitely be a proponent of both. But you can kind of do whatever you'd like. And then when you are finished, you're going to write a 300-word minimum paper, just kind of telling me what you did, why you did it, as we said in yesterday's session. The paper is not so much like a formal paper you have to be concerned about, but it's more like if we were to sit down together and kind of chat about what you've created. Your paper would be kind of you walking me through why you chose the colors that you did, why you chose the font that you did, why you chose the arrangement, what your song is, so kind of telling the story behind the piece itself is kind of what the hope of that is. All right, so when you're all finished, you're going to put everything into a single folder, zip it, and submit it, and all should be good. All right, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the assignment. And as I said yesterday, we're actually going to take a look at just a couple kind of examples from past classes, mostly because I know with an assignment like this, it's a little tricky sometimes because, I say abstracted and it's like, oh, it's really hard to be abstracted because we're so used to designing in such a literal sense. So I think it's helpful to kind of see what other students have done, so you can kind of get that visual of this is some sort of potential. So ideally, I would tell you what the song is and read you a little snippet of someone's writing, but I just have the picture, so we're just going to have to kind of look at it from a purely kind of form-oriented way. But here's the first one, so you can see the student clearly channeling some sort of energetic connection with the colors of the lines, with these kind of glowing orbs that are spinning through. And super cool, you can see that the brush is definitely in play, just in the way those strokes are coming together. And there is like a really nice sense of overall dimensionality to this. And if you zoom in, you can really see those individual kind of brush strokes coming out and just the kind of core energy and movement. And if we were looking at this through our Eaton color contrasts, he would be probably very keen on the way the contrast of dark and light is happening with that dark background, which is really, activating those front light elements in an interesting way. All right, so here's another one. And this one actually does include a little written piece about it. And you can see also a little link to the song itself, which would be a nice touch if you want to put that in. But yeah, so this is the poster itself. It's kind of this bird-looking image, and see if we can zoom in a little bit in a way that won't pixelate it. This student chose to actually mock it up into a frame, which I think is genius because it looks like a painting. And so, why not give it that extra step of kind of contextualization and show how it actually could, turn into something. So kind of cool. Yeah, so you can see here the bird, some sort of flower stuff, some more lines. And then you can see here kind of an explanation of what the different colors mean and why they're used. If you're like, wait a second, we couldn't use representations of stuff, you can kind of, you can hint at something as long as it's not, a photo or a piece of clip art or something that's a direct copy of something else. So that's, kind of what you can think about. All right, so here's another poster. You can see here this is slightly more representational as well, but you have some trees, you have the sun-ish kind of maybe, different brush strokes that really look like sky, a little bit of dirt and things coming together. So it feels interesting. It feels kind of definitely artistic, and by artistic I mean kind of created with traditional visual art materials as opposed to digital means, but still kind of having that abstracted feel to it. And what I love with this one is just how much open space there is left on the canvas. So, stay true to whatever your concept is for your piece, but don't be afraid to also just, leave some bits and pieces and parts open so that your composition kind of has that breathing space as well as that kind of full activated space. All right. Here is another one. And you can see this one's very much channeling the brushes, perhaps even some mixer brush happening within Photoshop. So it's got an interesting kind of layered textural feel to it. And this one I actually love because it does look like it was created with physical art materials. So it really has that sense of, kind of movement and play. Another one, slightly more literal, with shapes and things, also floods of color. So hopefully as we're looking through these, you guys can see that these really are very diverse. And so it kind of is whatever, really whatever your concept is for your song and for your kind of overall mood and feel for the piece is what you should go off of as you create. So there's not one answer, there's not one thing I'm looking for. It really is your kind of overall creative vision for what you're doing and showing how it will come together. This one's like almost too hard to look at because of the colors, but also I love this kind of abstracted city scene. Very cool. Here's a couple more. So we're actually going to talk about creating this halftone pattern, how you do that. Super simple and really cool. Here's another one. Again, just, layering of stuff seems to work. And layering of stuff too tends to give it a really interesting kind of depth and density in many ways. There's another explanation. And here's the final one. Again, you can see it's just, colors, fields of light, different things kind of coming together, kind of getting erased out, stacked together, and just kind of coming together in a really interesting way. So hopefully these examples are good for everyone to see, just to kind of give you a sense of what this assignment is all about, kind of what I might be looking for this. So it is abstract, just as I've been saying, it's abstract. Like, go for it. Don't try to, make anything too representational. And, if there's that little voice inside of you that says, well, it doesn't really look like anything, that's a good thing, kind of push it and see how you can make it kind of feel like an emotion as opposed to look like, something so literal. All right. So let's jump in now. And as always, if you're, thinking like, I don't know about this whole thing, you can definitely just send me an email or send me a message, and I would be happy to, just give you my thoughts, encourage you, see what I think, see if I feel like it looks like anything, and kind of go from there. Okay, so we are going to transition into Illustrator, and just kind of as a framework of where we're going to go for the next probably like 30-ish minutes, we're going to talk about creating halftone patterns in Illustrator. Then we're going to talk about creating 3D shapes, so kind of extruding and beveling a shape in Illustrator. Then we're going to talk about bringing things from Illustrator into Photoshop. And then we're going to talk about the layer styles, kind of different settings of stuff that you can do in Photoshop, and just explore a little bit more kind of document transformation once you bring something into Photoshop. So all the different relatively easy and yet huge impact things you can do, especially regarding color and your own kind of layering up in Photoshop. So first thing we're going to do is halftone patterning. And basically, if you're wondering what a halftone is, let me just draw something and we can quickly show it, as opposed to actually doing something that convert that into a gradient. So basically, halftoning is where you convert something into a series of dots. So it's when we talk about different printing methods, often when you see a CMYK, close-up zoom in, it has a halftone pattern applied to it, and you see like all these little dots set at different angles, and that's kind of how you see the color. So when you set a halftone pattern in Illustrator, it kind of takes that idea and applies, so it converts whatever you've created into a series of dots, so into almost like a screen setting. So it mimics how it would look if it were printed. So it's pretty cool and super easy. So we're going to go over just kind of basic halftoning. So as you saw, I had a shape and I initially had it filled with a gradient. So let's see if I have a gradient. So we can turn it to, let's do something slightly different. So you fill it with a gradient, and then you come up here to Effect and Pixelate, and then go to Color Halftone, and then you set whatever your radius is for your pixels. And basically what the radius for your pixels means is the size of your dots. So if you make it super tiny, like if we do like 10, it's going to be like these really tiny dots that you may or may not be able to see. Can we even see them? I don't think so. So we're going to undo that and go to Pixelate, Color Halftone, set it to like 40, see if that's going to change things. All right, or we're going to switch it out to going back to the usual suspects, since apparently that didn't halftone. But yes, you can see the bigger the number is going to be the bigger the dots that you have in your screen. So this is kind of a cool thing on its own. You could take this, patterning and move it into, you could actually even just copy it and then move it into Photoshop, and then use it as a layer and start manipulating if you want to. You can change the could you change that? You can. You can change the parts of the gradient. You could probably even change the colors of the gradient. I'm not going to mess with it too much because it's kind of a heavy process, and I don't want to lose you all in Zoom, and I also don't want my computer to freeze up. But kind of a cool thing in itself. This becomes a pattern that you can then do some interesting things with. Another thing that you can do, so this is if you're working in black and white. If you're working in color, you can also take an image and actually turn it into a color halftone as well. And we're going to take a look at that. So I have this picture of an airplane. And so I was thinking, as I was thinking about how I was going to kind of teach this out and explain things, I said, well, obviously the easiest way is for me to, actually have a song and listen and think as well. So I was listening to Postal Service this morning, and it's kind of like techno, kind of electronic music. And whenever I hear it, it's very kind of positive and upbeat. So whenever I hear it, I always kind of think of like excitement and like energy, and a little bit like elevator music meets travel meets like movie soundtrack. So when I was thinking of those kind of emotions, I said, oh, it'd be kind of cool to have like an airplane that was abstracted, doing something in the poster. So where I went to, and where I would recommend you guys go to if you want some sort of abstracted imagery, is this great website called Pexels.com. I'll type that in the chat box for those of you who are here. And it's free stock imagery, and you can search for just about anything, and they have really cool stuff. And it's all very like atmospheric and just cool to kind of browse through. Oh, sheep. But yeah, so you can take these and then, bring them into Photoshop, bring them into Illustrator, do a whole bunch of crazy, amazing manipulations and turn them into something that's very abstracted. So I have my airplane, and what I'm going to do is just do the same thing. So Effect, Pixelate, Color Halftone. And what you're going to notice is that, let's set this kind of small, is that because it's a color image, rather than just setting the dots at black and white, it's actually setting the dots at CMYK. So it's converting them to how this image could look if it was a printed thing. So it's cool too, because it's just another way to just kind of convert. Apparently we can't go that low, but just to kind of convert, to abstract something, so it turns into, you kind of know it's an airplane, but it also is a little bit kind of obscured. And so it's just quick, easy, pretty simple, and kind of a fun technique to use as well. And again, you can take this, copy it, paste it into Photoshop, which we're going to do in just a bit. And it's a cool, kind of a cool technique to play with. One other thing we're going to do with regards to these halftone shapes is, so to create a black and white halftone, you need a variation in color, which is why you need a gradient happening, so that you can have the change in dots, so from big dots to small. So it doesn't, it works in grayscale. It doesn't work quite as well in color, because it does kind of that CMYK thing. So so one other cool thing you can do is, so I have my box. We're going to go to Effect, Pixelate, Color Halftone, which is kind of misleading because it's black and white, but same principle. So you can actually take this then, if you want to, and you can rotate it, but I kind of want to just rotate it at 90 degrees. And so right now this is all kind of just one pattern. It's kind of like one chunk. If you want to kind of separate it into individual pieces, you can do that by expanding it and then change individual colors and actually select individual dots, which again is kind of a cool thing to try. So to do that, we're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. So it's essentially going to like bake in the halftoning, so that it kind of integrates as opposed to just being an effect that sits on top of it. And then we're going to come to Object and Image Trace, and we're going to do Make. And of course, it's going to tell you it's going to be slow because it's a big thing. But basically what we're doing now is tracing over the halftone pattern that's applied. And so now we can take individual pieces of this. We can change individual colors. We can just kind of manipulate each of these pieces as opposed to manipulating it as a whole. So we live traced it. So we just need to expand it now and click OK. And then we also need to ungroup it. There it is. And now, oops, ungroup it again. And you'll see that we have the ability to grab each of these little guys. And it's kind of cool because now you can go through and just choose like individual dots. And so it's an easy way to create like a field of dots if you want that for whatever purpose. And then to go in there and really, kind of customize just individual ones. And it's kind of a cool effect in a lot of ways. Let's get rid of that background. And then you can take this, of course, and then expand it out. If you want to, you can rotate it. You can take half of them and do something different. You could group those together, change up their color, start playing with it. And this is just fully vector now. So it's, so it's relatively small and stable. And then you can, just play with it and pull it around and move it. And I think it's super cool because it's just, you could draw these dots by hand, but that would be a nightmare. So you can just use this patterning feature in Illustrator to your advantage, and then just, create something that feels very kind of artful and definitely abstract in a lot of different ways. So It's kind of cool too. How, let's get rid of that guy. Oops. Ooh. You know, kind of the happy accidents then happen that you kind of have no idea what's going to happen, as with most things that are abstracted. But if you kind of play with it, you know, you never know what kind of cool stuff might emerge. Ooh, I like it. All right, let's see if we could turn this into slightly less. So anyway, halftone patterning, definitely worth a try, worth a checkout in Illustrator. Ooh, I love it. And it's just, you know, you can play with and move these dots and just, you know, see what happens. And this looks, you know, I would say this looks like a poster that is abstracted, and that could have some like techno-y music vibes to it. And especially if we brought the, see what would happen if we brought this inside of it. Pixelates, color halftone. Whew, that's like a nothing thing. Let's try a little smaller to 4. Copy it, paste it, and then grab that appearance panel. And is it this guy? Maybe if we did it 10. So it's cool because the appearance panel is your, it allows you to switch whatever your halftone is. Your shape kind of stays live until you expand it. So you can keep on changing it up and moving it around and what have you. So let's send that to the back. So did that do anything, or did that just create a jumble? I don't know if it did anything, but that's okay. So the same thing with this, as you're creating kind of in an abstract manner, it's very important to kind of critically step back and say, okay, I just did something. Is it a thing, or does it now just feel confused? And if it feels confused, you know, just get rid of it, hit delete, and go from there. Okay, so that is halftone patterning in Illustrator. Definitely something cool to check out. The other thing that's kind of cool to check out is, okay, let's see. I used a halftone brush last week. This is much more useful. Yeah, and it's super cool because you can really customize it. Like, I think I'm all for brushes, but I mean, if you want to just play with the raw stuff too, you just go with it and see what happens. And if you ever get an error that it can't convert to halftone, it's most likely because the color is a little bit off. So images turn into halftone much easier if they're black and white. They kind of stay more true to the image. So just, you know, you have to persist through a little. There's a couple of weird things where it may or may not work. So, but like anything, you know, you just have to play around with it. Do a Google search if you get lost, like literally, how do I get this to work? You know, whatever this might be in Illustrator or in Photoshop. And generally the knowledge is out there in some capacity. All right, so next thing we're going to talk about is kind of the 3D factor in Illustrator. And the reason that we're going to do this is because I actually was kind of playing around to see what kind of cool abstracted stuff I could make. And one of the things I found that was really interesting, I thought, was creating, where is it? This guy. Oops. Creating this thing, which is actually a star that's been like extruded in things in Illustrator. And then I put some filters on it, I put some gradients on it, and it's just kind of like a wild, wacky kind of symbol that I thought was kind of fun as well. And if you just kind of layer a bunch of them together, you really get kind of a cool feeling of kind of movement and stacking and layering and such. So same thing, we're going to start out with a shape. We're going to go to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel, and we want to do a preview. And you'll see that you can kind of get the preview of what it's going to look like. And then From here, with the preview turned on, you can start changing up different things, changing up different profiles or pictures or whatever you want to do, just to test and see what's going to happen. And then bevel, kind of introduce some different, introduce different elements, play with the depth. So depth is how long it gets, essentially. And again, this is just another way to make abstract shapes. And, you know, you could, ooh, this is when it gets really crazy. You know, there's math behind everything that you're going to get. So in theory, you could kind of figure out what you're going to do by playing with this. But I think it's more fun to just kind of play and see what's going to happen on it. You know, to kind of move these elements, and you can always move this guy too. See what you like. See if we can get it straight. Does that look like anything? Looks kind of like a lantern. And then change up the shading, see how that looks. I like plastic. Okay, and then when you have something that you feel like is kind of fun, that you're kind of feeling, you just do okay. And here is your here's your interesting shape in a lot of different ways. So you can do it with a colorful shape as well. I did it with a star because I like how all the edges happen to come together. I feel like if you have a shape that's a little bit too regular, it doesn't have all the kind of points and things that a star does, but definitely something to, you know, try as well. So always make sure your preview button is turned on. Let's do diffuse shading with this one. Let's see the depth. Get into kind of a... And the cool thing with this is that this is actually very good practice for working with 3D, oops, it's rendering, working with 3D shapes in Illustrator, because I feel like well, this might just be me, but I feel like there's kind of this like, oh man, it's so hard to work 3D. You have to really take like a special, you know, you have to use the mathiness of your brain to do it. And in some ways you do, but in a lot of ways too, it is just kind of thinking about your own visual perception and using that as your guide. So kind of becoming aware, of all that's possible, and then kind of having that be the thing that kind of holds it together. And this, I think, is not going to work, so I might stop it. But these are all, like I said, these are all very heavy things to enact. So you want to be a little bit careful that, you know, you are saving constantly, which I have not been. But make sure that you're saving, especially if you, like me, have a computer that is a bit slower. Yeah, sometimes that in itself is kind of the thing that doesn't limit you, but does kind of set the boundaries as far as what you're going to do. Yes, I don't think that's gonna do anything. So we're just gonna cancel that guy out. It's a nice shape as is. Okay, so what we're gonna do is just grab this thing, this kind of extruded star, and jump into Photoshop. And so Photoshop, and now I'm a little bit paranoid that something's going to crash, but that's okay. Photoshop and Illustrator play very well together as far as kind of copy paste. So you can take something that you create in Illustrator, just Command C and then Command V, and paste it into place. If you want to paste it as something that you can go back and then edit in Illustrator, and it will kind of live update into Photoshop, paste it in as a smart object. If you want it to be something that's very small, that's going to not increase your file size like crazy, and you're okay with not being able to edit it, paste it as pixels, just because pixels are smaller. So I'm going to do it as pixels. because I don't need to really work with this guy too much, I don't think. Well, if I do, I can always repaste it. But yeah, so we have this. We can kind of move it up, jump it around, whatever. And what we can do also is put some different effects on top of it. So we could do like a gradient overlay if we wanted to. Ooh, that's kind of cool. You know, and again, kind of turn it into something else. You'll see that the opacity is set. Mine was set low, but you can turn it up. So suddenly it becomes like a jagged, I actually kind of like that. You can play with the scale. So again, just like in Illustrator, you know, in these boxes, play with whatever's going on and see kind of what the boundaries are that you have to work with and see what you like. Ooh, that, I feel like Newton would just go crazy for that one. Diamond, what's that? Ooh. Okay, I liked the linear best. So this almost kind of now looks like it's like a jagged picture frame or something. That's kind of cool. And then let's grab some of these dots. Some of my, I want them to be black. And again, come back in here, paste. I'm just going to do pixels again. And add these elements. And the cool thing now is that, well, not quite now because I'm going to grab just a couple more. Let's grab all of these. So you just copy them, you just paste them, and they come in on their own layer, and then you can, you know, alter and shift them from there. But yeah, so the cool thing now is that we can start working as well with our layer styles, which would be up here. Or I'm sorry, our blending modes, which would be up here. And so I'm going to take this guy, copy it. So I have two, and I'm actually going to skew this one from normal, something different. Let's see if I did overlay. Well, that's not going to do anything. I think because I have nothing behind it, it's not going to show up. All right, so we're going to change something up in just a second. Let's see if that does anything. No. Okay, we'll get rid of that layer. And let's put, oh, I know what we'll do. Let's cancel that out. Let's grab our airplane, which is here. Copy that, paste it. Again, let's just do it as pixels. Put it in here. Move it to the back. Change this up, see if that does anything. It's all wonderful in theory until it doesn't do anything, and then you're like, well, this was not the thing to try. But I mean, it just goes to show you that yay, there it is. That did something. A lot of this is just like kind of trial and error to see what may or may not happen, and it's kind of cool once you get something that works. And then, oh, I see the plane. We're going to move this up. And what's even more cool too is you can see the halftone of the plane itself kind of coming through. Ooh, I like that. And kind of moving up. Oops. Move it around. So basically, all I'm doing, this isn't this isn't rocket science, but I'm just playing with the different modes. So you know, just the different blending modes that can happen within a layer. The different, we could play with opacities a bit. You know, I'm just copying and pasting and seeing then how it shifts and changes, and kind of what happens in the process. So couple things to note is when you're working with these blending modes, they blend according to what's below them. And so as I was kind of working with that first round, nothing was really happening because the only thing I had below it was white. And so it didn't have the ability to blend over anything. So, if you're trying something and you're like, nothing's happening, what's wrong? Just make sure that you have something underneath that you can actually blend, and it should be good. The other thing you can do too, I know you're never supposed to erase in Photoshop, but you actually could erase because this is all experimental anyways. And so I'm just going to come through and erase part of this halftone, and then just have part of the airplane kind of show up, and you'll see it's kind of moving through in an interesting manner. And if I had an eraser that was a different shape, I just turned up the opacity. I kind of like it. If I had an eraser that was a different shape, I could do something like, let's put a shape in. And then you have to, of course, rasterize the shape first before you can erase it, which is fine. And then I'm going to grab a different brush. Oops. And just like we learned with our mixer brush exercises, you can switch your brush tip and then something different appears. So let's do, these are always just so disgusting, but they turn into really cool brushes, but just the name is kind of disturbing. Okay, so I have opacity turned up, click, and then you can do a little bit of a shift into what's going on. So you can kind of soften your shape just by breaking it down. And a lot of these brushes, it almost kind of looks like, because we're erasing out in kind of an uneven map, it almost looks like a brush, like a paint splatter or something that's kind of come into the piece. So very cool. I like it. Okay, let's see if we can move this over just a bit. So all of this to say, like, just play and see what you come up with. And for this assignment, really just try to have fun with this, the potential that's here. Because literally, guys, it doesn't have to be anything. It has to be kind of whatever you want it to be. So I'm loving this thing. And like, it's kind of loosely based on feelings and such that I had when I was first listening to Postal Service this morning. So kind of the feeling of like takeoff and adventure and whatever. And so I'm channeling that through bright colors. I'm channeling that through lots of abstracted layers. I'm channeling that through kind of the arrangement that's constantly shifting. But yeah, so I mean, I could be persuaded in a lot of different ways as you guys write about your work, kind of what's going on. And kind of the thing I'm looking most for is just seeing, what's your fun experimental factor in this, and kind of how are you pushing yourself and pushing these different things to kind of create something that's new and unique. So this is really kind of a creativity challenge in so many different ways. So yeah, so turn on the music, turn on the tunes, get out your software, start playing, and don't have expectations on yourself. Just kind of try these different techniques and see what you might come up with in the process. So okay, so just to recap, we talked about halftoning in Illustrator, kind of creating a black and white, creating a color using an image. Then we talked about creating 3D shapes in Illustrator as well. And then we talked about how you can copy and paste between Illustrator and Photoshop and really use different elements created in each to kind of become something unique. Like, who would have thought that this thing that I created actually is the frame that's kind of showing this airplane halftone, but it's working and it's kind of cool, kind of how it's breaking through. So combine, experiment, see what happens, and you never really know until you give it a try. Ooh, if we darken that looks even cooler too. Yeah, you never know until you give it a try. and see what may or may not work or what may or may not appear. So yeah, definitely give it a shot. All right, well, on that note, we will wrap things up. But as usual, if you guys have any questions about anything, or like I said, if you just want to kind of share what your in-process project is, I would be all about that. So you can feel free to reach out to me, send it to me, whatever. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you all next week. We actually only have one session because it is Thanksgiving. So it will be kind of everything and then some in that single session. But don't worry, even though it's a holiday, I'll be very available. And I will always, always, always accept late work. So that's a good thing as well. Otherwise, yeah, hopefully you guys have a great rest of the week, or whatever day it might be. And I will look forward to seeing projects that come in this whole scheme. All right, take care, guys.